You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we have a special guest and we'll get back to her in just a moment. But first, a message from our partner at CallRail. How many high-value cases do you think you lost in the last year because your firm couldn't respond fast enough? 81% of law firms say slow response times actually cost them business and sometimes nearly a quarter of their annual revenue. That's why you need to get CallRail as soon as you can. Integrate into your case management system. CallRail is going to help you capture every call, even after hours, spot high-value leads instantly, respond faster, and gain the insights you need to bring in bigger cases. Join over 3,000 law firms using CallRail to follow up faster, land bigger cases, and drive real growth. Contact me and we'll set you up with them. There's also a link as well. Now back to our guest. Welcome in Amanda Lee, founder and CEO of the Lee Consultants.
Thank you. Thank you.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Good. So as a proper introduction, Amanda brings over 20 years of experience as a criminal prosecutor and civil litigator, where she advocated for women and children, first chaired dozens of jury trials, and served in leadership roles across legal and nonprofit sectors. She has also worked as a special assistant U.S. attorney and litigation counsel for major organizations. Amanda is based in Maryland and now leads the Lee Consultants, where she provides confidential trauma-informed coaching and executive-level training to support high-achieving professionals experiencing domestic abuse, helping both individuals and organizations navigate this often hidden and misunderstood reality. Important stuff today. Thank you for sharing, Amanda Lee. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
For sure. So let's just start with the beginning. This is Lawyer Stories. So we want to know where you're from and basically what drew you towards a career in the law.
I'm from Maryland. I'm still here. I really wanted to be a lawyer since I was little. It's really what I always wanted to do. I thought the law was fascinating. I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney. That's why I went to law school. I said, I am going to be a criminal defense attorney. That's what I meant to do. But then when I graduated, I got a clerkship in circuit court because, again, I knew I wanted to be a trial attorney. Circuit court was where I should be. And then it was time, my clerkship ended, and I got an offer at state's attorney's office and at a criminal defense firm. And a lot of people said, the best prosecutor, the best defense attorneys start as prosecutors because you learn how to do the case. So I went there, and that started my journey. And now 21 years later, I have never actually done criminal defense.
You've never done it. So you were, that's crazy. So you started there, you were like, I'm going to flip over, and you just you kept going. Did you love it?
I did. So I unexpectedly, when I went there, I just thought I'm going to be a prosecutor. I had no really idea of what I was going to do. I didn't think I would specialize in anything, but I specialized in sex crimes and child abuse. Yeah. They very early on put me in that unit, starting at the district court type of instance and learning from those that had been doing it for many, many years. And I loved it. Hard cases. Don't get me wrong, very, very difficult, but I just felt like I was doing something meaningful, and I just really, really enjoyed it. And then I left there after, about 7 years or something like that to go to Baltimore City Public Schools, which is one of the largest school systems in the nation, where I did civil litigation for them. I was an advisor. I advised their CEO. I did all of their civil litigation, and that was everything from circuit court to federal court.
And that's the city, the schools?
Yeah, Baltimore City Public Schools. It's a very, very large school system, multi-billion-dollar organization. Yeah, and they get sued a lot. So
what kind of cases did you see?
Oh, it was everything from the minor torts. You got someone a slip and fall. Just a little time. Not a lot of injuries. To employment discrimination. To I had a case that went up to the Supreme Court because we have police officers, and one of our officers was on his break
Yep.
sitting it was actually at a Wendy's near our school.
Nice.
And there was an armed robbery across the street at a Family Dollar, and he ended up shooting someone who had hostages. And that person then was convicted of this armed robbery, but then sued us for excessive force. And this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Wow.
They denied cert, but I argued in the Fourth Circuit, defending the officer. We won. And then again, cert was
What was
denied.
it, like an agency issue? Like he wasn't acting within the scope of his duty at that time?
Well, he was. I mean, he was on duty, but they said that it was excessive force.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
yep,
right.
it was an excessive force because he did shoot him in the back, but it's because the person was turning to run as the
Okay.
shots
All right. I
fired.
thought maybe because he was on break or something, but I guess that wouldn't matter if he's wearing all his uniform and everything.
Yep, he was still on duty, and he was in his jurisdiction because the
Right.
officers had jurisdiction outside of the schools, still in the city. So I handled, it was everything, every type of case. I mean, there
That's
was
crazy. So you're like dipping into like civil personal injuries, slip and falls, like criminal, like shooting. Did
Oh,
the
yeah.
guy finish as Frosty, do you know, like at Wendy's? Like,
I don't even know. But it was one of those lunch breaks that he did not expect was ever.
yeah, no kidding.
thought-
You're just sitting there. Hey, I mean, what a guy though, He didn't
Right.
turn his head. He
Right.
you know, then he got you all in trouble, sort of. But anyway, so all right, so that's interesting. And early on, you were advocating for women and children.
Yeah.
So, like, where did that passion come from?
So early on, I mean, it really started when I was, working with the victims of the sex crimes and child abuse. That was where I really was exposed to different organizations because, part of what we did with these cases was we worked with multidisciplinary teams. So we worked with different organizations. We helped the victims out. So I was meeting all of these different people in these organizations, and I loved what they did. So I started to join different boards, and I've been on boards throughout my career. Then they started when I was a prosecutor, and I've moved throughout. I mean, currently I serve on one called the Center for Hope in Baltimore, where we do a lot of trauma work and work with
Yep.
victims. So I've been doing that my whole career. But there was also the personal side as well that really did not come to light until recently.
So that's my question. Like, were you advocating for women and children like during your own personal issues, or was that before or after?
Oh, yeah. No, I was advocating for them while I was going through an abusive marriage. So
Okay.
my first 13 years of my legal career, I was in this marriage.
Okay.
And it was abusive, every type of abuse you can think of. I don't know how much you're familiar with domestic violence, but domestic violence does include many different types of abuse. There is the physical that everyone's used to.
Right.
There's also the emotional, the psychological. And some people say that that's the worst. And I will say that I'm one of those people that psychological abuse really is worse than the physical sometimes, actually often. And so I was going through that. I was putting people in jail for abusing others, for even for domestic
Wow, so
violence.
you were like the fiercest advocate that they probably could have hoped for. And like, did you ever think like, man, I really wish somebody would advocate for me like this, even though you are your own person, like you are your own attorney? Like, were you just like, man, this person has me. I wish I had kind of somebody who would go to bat for me, sort of thing.
Eventually I did, but while I was in it, I was so good at just compartmentalizing
Okay.
that it was always I'm in this role. I am this fierce advocate. I am a trial attorney. I'm this badass right now.
Right.
Like I'm doing what I need to do. I'm going to, that's what I was doing. I didn't even think about my situation. And when I would just think, nope, it's not as bad. There's all those mind games you even play with yourself. Like, well, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe it's not happening.
Were you comparing yourself to the people you were seeing come through? Is that what happened?
I was. There were a lot of time, and that was really what kept me silent for so long. It was,
Sure.
I'm different than them. I'm representing them, or at least in a way, representing their position. I'm fighting for justice for them. I'm different. So therefore, this can't be happening to me. Or if it is happening to me, I was thinking something must be wrong with me. So again, I just stayed silent. And yes, I wanted someone there to help me, but at the same time, I was so good at just pushing that thought away and just thinking, nope, I'm just doing my job.
And that was 13 years. And we're gonna talk, get into like a little bit more. No, I mean I'm really sorry like you had to go through that. And I think this is a very important, conversation for everybody to hear, for everything that goes on, because like you said, I mean, there's more to it than just the physical. So what did your day-to-day look like? Like you had a very respected legal career. So what was your day-to-day looking like during that 13-year window? And actually, how long ago was this? Like, can you give me like a...
Yeah, I left that situation in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, the divorce was final in 2018.
Okay. So what was like everyday life? Like you'd go into court, you'd be advocating.
Yeah. Yeah. Every day it was living this dual life and just keeping this secret so close hold, which meant that I was constantly stressed. I was constantly anxious. I was constantly afraid because I was, very dedicated to my job. I loved what I did. I loved being in court and being this advocate. But at the same time, I knew that I never knew what to expect when I got home. I always used to say,
Sure.
I always said it was like I could predict that it was going to be the unpredictable. It was always just, I don't know what I'm going to wake up to. So I didn't sleep for decades because I didn't know what I'd wake up to. I also didn't know what I'd come home to. So there's this, you're not feeling safe when you're at work because in your mind, you're always going through, well, what's going to happen next? Like if I missed a phone call, if I missed a text message, it was oh my gosh, I've got to go, call, make sure that, I'm checking in. And I mean, any litigator who's listening knows that that's really, really hard to do because you're in court all the time. So while I'm in court, while I'm doing everything, I'm sitting there thinking, hope I'm not missing a call. Oh, what time is it? I got to go get my kids. So I had 3 kids in 5 years. I mean, my youngest now is 14. Okay. So they were at the time young and I'm the one that has to do everything. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I got to get the kids. I got to get them. I got to get home. Again, while I'm prepping for juries, I'm having jury trials, or when I was in civil litigation, I've got depositions sometimes till 8:00 at night. But I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I've got to make sure everything's taken care of. And then I just never know what I'm going to walk into when I get home. So it was a very, very difficult situation and one that I couldn't talk to anybody about.
Really? Okay.
Because it was that thing where no one thinks it happens to people like us. Lawyers don't talk about it happening to us. It happens to the people we represent, we might help, we join the boards, we donate money, but it doesn't happen to us with that mentality. So I fought so hard to keep it quiet. And that's why I had to live this double life.
Wow. What are like some of the subtle signs at first that you see, like when you think like this is kind of, I don't know how long you were with this person, like before the whole thing started, but are there like subtle signs that people can look for?
Yeah, there definitely are signs. But I will say they can be hard to see because very often the signs can start off looking like they're these loving behaviors.
Okay.
Very often things like wanting to be with someone always and wanting to check in with them. That sounds wonderful, when you're with someone. But then you start to realize that it's really just to control you, when it's like, oh, wait, they're not just asking where I am because they care. They're asking because if I'm not where they want me to be, there's going to be some consequence. That though the questioning that seems a little bit extra at first might just, again, feel like, oh, they're just really interested. But then when you start to look at it, you're like, oh, wait a second. Because what abuse is, it's about power and control. That's people think it's about physical and, asserting your power over someone physically, but it's not about that. It's about that physical, about the actual power and control over them and their life, not necessarily the physical violence.
So what about like financial control too? Is that a piece of it?
Oh yeah, that's definitely a big piece of abuse for many people, and it's not only controlling the money that the abuser makes, but even controlling what the victim makes. I mean, I've spoken to many victims who they're the breadwinner. I was the breadwinner. Yeah. But I had to watch what was happening with money. And, he was the one spending more of it than I was. But there's other people who, even as the breadwinner, their abuser's controlling it. They're the one that has all of it. They're the one that may dictate when they can get side jobs or other jobs, or, that's all a different type of abuse that falls under this domestic violence umbrella, which also makes it hard for people to realize when it's happening sometimes.
Yeah. So like, when did you personally realize that there was some sort of, it was going to be very difficult and there was a disconnect?
I didn't actually admit that I was a victim of domestic violence until probably about 4 years ago. I knew that it was bad, and I knew all the, I mean, just from my professionally, I knew all the signs. I knew all the types of abuses, but I would not let myself go there. I wouldn't let myself say it's really, I'm a victim. It was just, this is bad. I blamed it on his drinking problem. Oh, he's just, he's got a drinking problem. This isn't a good situation. I just wouldn't allow myself to say it until I got out.
Yeah. Wow. What was, can I get a little more personal? Like, what was like, I know there's probably not one that's worse than the other. And again, I'm very sorry that you had to go through this very important conversation for everybody out there. And I hope everybody truly does listen to this. So like, what was the worst of the types of domestic? Is that even a question to ask? I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a proper question to ask. I'm very empathetic to this. So I'm just curious, like, what the worst kind of.
Yeah, I actually think it's a great question, because most people think, when they think domestic violence, they think physical abuse. So they think, okay, that's got to be awful. If someone hits me or someone punches me, that's abuse and that's horrible. But so many victims that I've spoken to, including myself, used to wish for more physical abuse. We'd be like, okay, maybe if I had, a black eye, I would then maybe leave. Maybe that would make me, because that feels like it's easier.
Like, you were thinking if you had that. Okay.
Oh yeah, there were so many times I'd be like, well, maybe if I get injured, maybe then I'll believe it. Because you have these little thoughts. You're like, then it would prove to me that it's really that bad, because we're thinking all these other types of abuses, aren't quote unquote that bad, but they are, because they are even harder to heal from. If I mean, some of mine was physical. There were some bruises left. There were marks. Those healed. I couldn't even tell you where they were. I mean, I probably could if I thought about it, but they heal. The mental and the psychological consequences from this abuse has taken years, and intense therapy and finding the right therapist and talking to other people. That is what was so hard to overcome, because you get so wrapped up into it, and it just becomes part of your life. If you're physically abused and it's, something that happens occasionally, it's a little bit easier to then live life and not think about it. But when you're in this psychological and mental abuse, it is 24/7. It becomes, you become this person who is consumed by it, even though, like in my situation, I was thriving professionally. So then it's just this part that's constantly in my mind that makes life just so much harder.
Do you ever have flashbacks or like anything, like sort of like memories? I don't.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's triggers, like things that people wouldn't even understand because they didn't experience. So it might be something that, it could be a television show. It could be someone mentions, oh, have you ever been to this, place? And all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, that was the place that happened, and I will remember it. I've gotten really good. I mean, again, it's been years now and lots of healing and all of that. So I'm much better at just getting over it and saying, okay, that happened. But earlier on, especially after being out, I mean, it would be really hard because I would get sucked back into that, and my body would immediately remember how I felt in that moment, when I was at that place or wherever, and your body remembers this stuff. So I would actually have these reactions where my heart would beat and I would start to feel those, those anxiety or those fearful, really emotions like they were happening again.
Wow, that's intense. So what made it so difficult to speak about what you were experiencing at the time?
Really just the stigma that's associated with domestic violence. And I was so afraid that people would look at me and think, either how does she let that happen to her, or what's wrong with her, or it's her fault. And then in this professional world, we as attorneys are looked at as strong, and we're these advocates, and we're and we don't, nothing gets to us because we are the ones in control. We walk in a courtroom and we are the ones that are in control. I mean, I used to love that. My favorite thing about jury trials was the opening statement, because you're just there. You're like, look at me. This is this is my show. So that's what I'm supposed to be. But then when we think about victim, just in general, the kind of that stereotype of a victim, victims are passive, victims are weak, victims are decisive, they're dependent. So it doesn't look like what an attorney is. So I was just so afraid of people looking at me as that victim, and then they're going to question my competency. They're going to question whether I can do my job.
So you had like fear of judgment, like they might question,
so
like, how did she end up with a partner who does this? How is she going to handle my case? Or they're just like, how would this happen to such a professional woman? When it's happening to me, like that sort of thing.
And even colleagues too. Colleagues just wondering, like, how are trust her with my cases or these big decisions when she can't even take care of herself. Yeah.
So some of the cases you were taking, like, did you see like a lot of parallels to what you were going through?
Oh yeah. I could see it. I would hear it. I mean, the stories of victims are, I always say we have the same story with different details. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your social group is, and the abuse is the same, just with different details. The feelings that they felt, the questioning of themselves, all of that. I would sit there and I would be like, "Yep, I get this. I get this."
Okay. So what ultimately led you to the decision to leave the situation?
It really just got to a point where I said, "Okay, you know what? I've gotten used to this. I have been living this, and I've learned how to be as proactive as I can." And but I just said, I just can't anymore. I'm exhausted. And I was so afraid of what my life was going to look like. But I also was like, I can't live this anymore. My kids were young. My youngest was a son. He was just about to turn 5. And I was like, I can't let them see this anymore. Because as much as I tried to keep it away from them, they hear it, they see it. People always say, "Oh, I'm going to stay for the kids. I'm going to keep it away. They won't know." They know. They know. They can sense it. They can feel it. They can hear things that you don't think they can. And I just finally said, I can't. And, there was a night that something happened, the final night when I finally was like, yep, I've had enough. And now this happened. And I just said, you're not welcome in my home anymore.
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah.
So after leaving, like, what was that moment that made you realize that you wanted to help others going through something similar?
It was a couple years later when I said I finally started to admit that I was a victim. And so I started to talk a little bit more, very just, on personal levels. And I actually was in this group of law moms. We started as this really big, Facebook group of law moms, but then it ended up being, these little subgroups. And I was one that was very little, and we were all single, we were all lawyers, and we were all moms. And so, we got a little bit closer and we started talking, and I was hearing more women that had stories like me. And some of them were, being a little bit more open about, I was in an abusive marriage. And I just start hearing this, and we all start talking, and more of us, would start to tell our stories. And I thought, I'm not alone. And so many of them would say, oh, wow, like I thought I was alone, and everyone was already, again, not everyone, I don't want to say everyone in the group, but those of us that had experienced this. And it was just this awakening, like, wow, it is happening to other people. It's not just happening to me. And then this mentality, this idea lasted for probably about 2 years or so. I just kept thinking, wow, all of us have stayed silent for so long because we were afraid of what were people going to think, what's going to happen to our reputation. And I was actually out to dinner with my mentor. She was my boss when I worked at city schools. And we were talking about kind of what's next for me. And I was telling her, how much I really just want to help women. I was like, but of course I'm going to do, my legal work. I'm going to think about this. I said, but I really would like to maybe join a nonprofit to really focus on this. And I told her all about how much I wanted to help victims of domestic violence. And I had forgotten that I had never told her that I was a victim. Oh. And she just sat there looking at me, and she was like, okay, 2 things. One, how did I not know this was happening while you were working for me? She was like, serious. And I said, yeah, this is. And so that blew her away. But then she said, but I asked you what you see in your future. She's like, and you talked a little bit about, your legal career. She said, but then you just spent 20 minutes talking about how you want to help people like you and what you went. She said, why aren't you doing that? And I was like, I don't know, because I'm a lawyer. I've been on it, and that's what I've done. And we sat there for dinner. We sat for like 2 more hours, just start thinking about this. And then that was probably, when was that? That was like 2024, I think.
Okay.
And I started building, and I said, you know what? You're right. I love being a lawyer. I love everything about it. But my purpose in this life is to help people like me, people who are these professionals and they're thriving, but they're experiencing domestic violence and they don't know how to get out. And so it's, bringing that awareness to the level of, attorneys and executives, and also providing the help for those people.
Oh, it's so important. And you must have gotten chills when you had the conversation a bit, like you finally hit you like, wow, like I'm a lawyer, but I like love doing this. And like you talked, and I love how you said, like you talked this much about being a lawyer, and then you talk like for this much about wanting to help people in the situation that you were in. So how much bravery and like how much confidence does it take to create the lead consultant? Let's enter the lead consultants. Congratulations on your business, and tell us about it, and about being an entrepreneur and launching your own business.
It's been very challenging. It's been, I think, because of that personal level, especially when I first start thinking about it. After this dinner, I did go back to that group of women that I was talking to, and I said, I've got this crazy idea. What do people think? Those of you who are survivors.
Were you afraid they were going to steal your idea, though?
I was. You know what? I'm not gonna. This is such a lawyer thing, but I will admit it. I was doing interviews with them, and I made them sign NDAs.
Like what do you mean interviews?
I was interviewing them to get feedback, and I said, I want to tell you, because I didn't post it publicly publicly in the private group. Wow. I just said,
I need to give you feedback and sign an NDA. That's like a true friend, I think.
I know they are. I mean, we were all, and I didn't tell them what the business was, and that's what, hence and I said, listen, I want to interview people who are survivors. I have a business idea. Can we talk? And I did. I made them. I signed NDAs, and they gave me this feedback. And I was so scared during those interviews, thinking, what are they going to say? What are they even going to say? Are they going to think this is ridiculous? And the feedback was amazing.
What did they say about signing the NDA? Here that you are friends with them, and
we're all a bunch of lawyers. It's all a bunch of lawyers. Right. They said, that's fine. That's fine. They understood. They had known me for years, and they knew that this was something. They're like, we're here to support you. We'll sign it. What do you want? And I interviewed them all separately, and they were some of the most powerful interviews I've ever done. And just some phenomenal feedback, and that just made me say, all right, I'm going to do this. So I started the business plan, and it's been a little slow because I'm single mom to 3 kids, and I still work full time as an attorney. I do still work.
Okay. So when did you launch?
So what I did, I mean, I don't even remember the date that the LLC was probably like early 2025 when I started it. But then my public really launch was in August, because the Maryland State Bar Association asked me to write an article for their journal, their summer edition of their journal. So I wrote this article, really just exposing this reality, saying this is something that happens to attorneys, we need to address this. And they published it in August. So that was my jumping off point. And that was really the first time that I went truly public with my story, because the first paragraph or opening, page of this article is me talking about some of the dirty details, like how I used to have to take a picture of the clock on the corner of my laptop to send it to my then husband to prove that I was still in the office at 5:01 if I didn't leave at 5 o'clock. And I put that out there, and I was terrified, because I'm sitting there thinking, all of these attorneys that I respect, I've built my career around, are going to read this, and are they just going to think that I'm ridiculous? Like are they going to look at me and think, why did you do that? But the feedback I got was phenomenal. People, I mean, a lot of it was people saying, I can't believe this. They did say that, but people, they were shocked. But then they said, but I want to know more. Like, this happens to people like us.
No, I want to ask more details, but I don't right now. Yeah, but no, it happens to people like you. It's unbelievable. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it happens to so many. And Every time I have spoken anywhere, I have had somebody come up to me and say, that's me, but I can't tell anybody. Thank you for doing this. I've had people reach out in my, are they called DMs? I don't know what they're called on LinkedIn. Is it DM? Whatever the message, the messaging is, people from across the nation that I don't even know. I've had doctors, I've had other lawyers, I've had other executives saying, I saw your article. That's me.
Yeah, they have you write a blog post actually for our website.
Yeah.
If you have anything existing, like we'll definitely put it up. So,
Yeah.
tell me, Amanda, like about Lee Consultants, like the services you offer.
Yeah. So there's two different sides. There's the corporate side and then the personal direct individual side. So on the corporate side, it's all about raising awareness. So it's speaking at firms, at organizations, at conferences, anywhere where there are professionals. It doesn't have to be legal. Anyone who's at that professional, executive, leader, level, and it's speaking and saying, we need to start talking about this. This happens amongst us, and this is how you can support people. This is what you can do. This is how you can, help the people around you and be more aware. And I also talk about, this professional responsibility we have, especially as lawyers. One of the most recent talks I did is really about how this is something that affects our wellness. And we all talk about how important wellness is and how that impacts our responsibilities and our ethical obligations, but yet we're silent about the domestic violence being experienced by all.
You're a speaker on part of it. You're going around spreading the word. You're like advocating. So tell me about the corporate piece of it.
And that's the corporate piece is the speaking to, but also then getting involved with them with policy review. How can they be supportive? What types of things can they offer to their employees? And then also offering the individual side as part of their employee benefits package. So, we all have these employee assistance services that have great offerings, and a lot of their, the counseling, for example, is really great for someone maybe experiencing something that's maybe something that happened in their life. They might need counseling for 10 sessions or so. That is not a service that's equipped to handle someone who is experiencing domestic violence and wants to get out. So what they can do, companies can actually work with me and then their people, their executives, their leaders, if they want to get out of their situation, they can come directly to me, and that's part of their benefits package. And that's the coaching side. So I work with individuals and actually do one-on-one coaching with them to build a safety plan to get them out. I really call it more of the triage because it's not just the one-on-one coaching. I help them figure out every area of their life that they need. We talk with financial planners, we talk with counselors, whatever they need to get them in the position to feel like they can get out while also recognizing that they have these careers, they have their children, they have everything also going.
You're not representing them legally. So, so you're going in and you're doing like you're speaking to corporations, and if somebody comes up to you, you'll help them get to that'll be part of like the whole plan, right?
Yep.
And then you're coaching on the other side, like people can reach out to you via your website, say, hey, like I need help, like I have 3 bank accounts, and I need to know how to do the X, Y, and Z.
Yep. Yeah. And I will, and it's really the program, if you want to call it that, the program for this type of situation is 12 sessions. We can do it in over 12 weeks, or if they want to condense it or expand it, but it's 12 sessions. We're going to go through, and it's a very strategic plan to say, all right, we're going to figure out how to get you out safely, and then also plan for what's next.
Not to be devil's advocate, but is 12 weeks like too long to actually keep somebody in that situation and help them through it?
Not necessarily, because a lot of us have been living through it for decades.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't think you like to have questions like that, but I don't know, I'm trying to.
And it really could be sped up. If this person is in more of danger, if they are having, yes, we can. We can do this quickly. We can have a marathon Saturday session where we got 6 hours. That's part of what I'm offering, because this, I will admit, is not out there anywhere else.
So how do we need to amplify what you're doing somehow, and I'm happy to help you do it. So what gap did you see that wasn't being addressed and this is for high achieving professionals, since you're speaking at corporations?
Yes. And the gap is that service for them, because nonprofits are phenomenal. There's so many of them out there. There's all of these different women's shelters. they don't necessarily know how to address what someone in this situation needs, because most people in this situation, not
Yeah.
all, but there are a lot that they don't need a shelter. They have the finances or the resources to have their house and all of that.
Right.
They need someone to help them walk through this, develop the plan, while also figuring out what's next in their life. So it's this coaching aspect with all the other pieces that I help along with. And that was missing. And then, of course, that just awareness piece. When we talk about domestic violence in society and generally, it's very much this stereotypical victim who is uneducated, doesn't have any financial.
Right.
And so that's missing. And that's where I said, that's a gap too. I'm going to talk about this. I am going to be someone that says, this does happen, and I'm an example. So there was both gaps, and that's where I developed the two sides, the corporate and the.
Yeah.
And the
So you were just talking about like supporting professionals different from traditional domestic violence support models, or actually, how is it different than traditional models?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities in the sense that we have similar situations as far as the emotional aspect and the fear and the shame, and that's all there. But there's not necessarily that need for immediate shelter and legal help, which is often what they offer at these at the nonprofits, which again, that's really important. But people often miss this level where you're this professional. You want to come up with this strategic plan. You don't want to just leave in the middle of the night. That does happen sometimes. Don't get me wrong. There are people who, get in this situation where they do just have to do a quick escape. But very often they want to figure out this plan because they say, okay, I need to still maintain my career, maybe because that is how I'm making money, or maybe that's just because that's what I do and I love what I'm doing. And so that's what's missing. It's more of that quick piece. And again, they are wonderful. They often have groups, therapy groups. And I think that's really great. But often professionals aren't necessarily going to relate to people there. They might even get turned away because they do make too much money. So there's just all of these things where it's similar in the, their emotional aspect, but then more of the logistics are very different at times.
I'm on board. I love it. I love what you're doing. I think it's super important. So what does trauma-informed coaching look like in practice? Like what you're doing when you get somebody in the office, like what do you, tell me a little bit about that.
It's so trauma-informed, that this is a phrase that's been used a lot lately, but I will say it is very specific. It is all about using language that's supportive, that's empathetic, that's validating, not putting in any kind of judgment or assumptions or conclusions. So it's very, very unique in the sense that you're letting that person really get their power back or feel like they have some power. Whereas a lot of times coaching, you are letting them lead, but you're not always as cognizant of what they've been through and knowing all that they've been through and trying to work with that as well and being empathetic and knowing that. So, also just being through it, I definitely can relate on a different level. But being trauma informed is also very, there's a way to be trained for that. And I've been through the courses.
You've done a lot of training.
I've been through. Mm-hmm.
Do you have to do trainings to like do this type? I mean, I think you've done enough training being a victim of it, but it's like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's such like a laughing thing, but I'm just wondering if like you could just kind of go in without like a specific sort of.
Coaching is not a regulated business. So there is, you don't have to, but I'm a certified professional coach. I've been through, the trauma informed coaches. I'm part of the ICF, a member. So there's definitely.
Don't you feel like after you pass the bar exam and become a lawyer, like you shouldn't have to take any of these old tests,
Right.
You're more qualified for anything, really.
Anything. And people think we are. Everyone calls us for everything. It doesn't matter what kind of law you practice.
I'm sorry. No, this isn't. So what would you say like most workplaces? I think you did touch on it, but like, what do they mostly get wrong about supporting employees facing this abuse?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that they get wrong that it doesn't happen to people like us. It might happen to like the lower level, or it might happen to those people, but not us. It's never talked about as it happens to us. And that alone, just that silence and that lack of acknowledgement is really damaging to victims because it makes us stay silent. And then there's just the misunderstanding of what it is. Again, people often think if it's not physical,
Right.
then it's not abuse, or that it must be easy to leave. That's another thing too. Oh, well, if it's not physical, what are you afraid of? Just leave. People don't understand that that's psychological and that emotional.
So what should we be looking for? So if it's not physical, it's
Yeah.
psychological, like name calling. I'm not even going to try to list them. Maybe you could tell us.
Right. No, it is. It's everything from the name calling, the accusations, the blaming, the gaslighting, the humiliation, anything that is any type of behavior that is done to assert, control and power over another one, over your partner. So it's really just anything you can do to make your partner feel like they are worthless, like they do not have power, like they do not have control. However, whatever kind of behavior that is the abusive behavior. And so it is. It's all about abuse, power and control.
Okay. So Amanda, like, what do you want high achieving professionals who may be struggling silently with this to understand?
I want them to understand that they're not alone and that it's not their fault and they can get out.
Okay. Good. And what does shifting the conversation from stigma to support look like in the legal profession moving forward?
It looks like talking about this as something that is not, that doesn't carry shame, that it's not something that defines you. And it's just talking about it like we do any other kind of wellness. We could talk about physical health. We talk about mental health sometimes. We talk about, anything along those lines about being healthy. Why aren't we talking about this? And it's because it's stigmatized right now. So it's really just about saying, hey, this happens and we want to be supportive. We want to acknowledge it and be there in any way.
Amanda Lee, I love it. Is there anything like you want to, any advice or anything else you want to get across that we haven't touched on today?
No, I just want to get the word out there, both from for people to really break the stigma, but also for individuals experiencing it to know there's somewhere to go.
Love it. And I'm really glad we had this conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Stay right there. Okay.
Well-
Everybody else, Amanda Lee Consultants, such an important conversation that we're going to continue. We're going to help Amanda to get out there and amplify the voice and everything that she's doing. So important. Thanks again for coming on, sharing your story and being so open with us. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. Wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourself. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.